Hey guys, you're watching TechEdit. I'm Basil. This is the Motorola Edge 50 Pro. This phone is beautiful. It feels great in the hand. The screen is stunning, Pantone validated, and it's got over 0.5 terabyte of storage inside, as well as some of the fastest charging wired and wireless that you're gonna see at its price. It's also got the best Motorola camera that I have ever used, but there are some real drawbacks. It's really slow to process photos. The shot you take may not actually be the shot you end up with, and the video is pretty janky as well. I'll come on to everything about this phone's performance, but before I even do, the pricing's also pretty confusing. If you're in Europe or the UK, you're going to be paying roughly double what you'd be paying in India. So it's a brilliant deal if you're in India, but in the UK or Europe, it's a tougher sell. But should you still consider one? That's what this video is all about. Before I jump into this phone, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do. It's how you stay on top of everything that I do. Starting with the design, and how the phone looks and feels is massively going to be dictated by the color you go for. Available in two finishes, either acetate or vegan leather. The acetate white one I've got here is Moonlight Pearl, and it's kind of got a mother of pearl finish like the P60 Pro. Or you can go for Luxe Lavender, which is purple vegan leather, or Black Beauty, black vegan leather. Now, on this acetate version, this Moonlight Pearl one, each Motorola Edge 50 Pro in this color is different because it's created with a handcrafted process. So if you like something a bit more showy, then this could be a great option for you. Personally, I prefer the vegan leather options, especially the black one, which is a bit more classical, but the purple one looks very, very fun. One thing I will say though about this white option, the writing at the bottom, the CE mark, etc., is more visible on it than the other versions. So it's a bit of a shame that that wasn't a bit more subtle to complement the rest of the phone's styling. As for how the whole phone feels in the hand, it's got a metal frame that tapers in really nicely with that curved back, curved front, and it feels cool to the touch. All the buttons are along the right hand side. Volume and power button. Down at the base is a speaker, USB-C port, and a single SIM slot. There's also an eSIM inside here as well. And around the back is where that color popping is really going to happen if you have the purple one or this white one, that texture. And it all raises to the camera surround very, very elegantly, creating a pretty comfortable finger rest when you're holding it in the right hand, kind of reminiscent of an Oppo Find X3. Now, this phone isn't the thinnest around. It's roughly 8.19 millimeters. However, it feels thinner than it is because of those tapered sides, and fans of curved screens are really going to appreciate this phone. When it comes to durability, the phone's IP68 water and dust resistant, and there's Gorilla Glass on the front. No pre-fitted screen protector, so that's one thing to note, but you do get a case in the box. Onto the screen, and it's a real high point of this phone. Now, I mentioned it was Pantone validated, but that's only in the natural color calibration. You can activate that in the display settings. By default, it's actually set to vivid, so it isn't Pantone color calibrated out of the box, but it's easy to switch up, or you can choose radiant for a different kind of zingy look. Even better, dive deeper into those settings and you can select the white balance and tune the screen to look great for your eyes. I really enjoyed this display. The curved screen obviously is going to have some color warping at the edges, but it makes gesturing in left and right really, really comfortable. And the 6.7-inch display is a good size. It's also relatively sharp, 446 pixels per inch, so you are not going to be pixel peeping anytime soon. And with a smooth 144 Hz refresh rate, everything glides on it when performance can keep up with you. And that's something I'll come on to a little bit later. In the settings, you can actually lock the refresh rate to 144 Hz, 60 Hz, 120 Hz, which is a nice happy medium, or let it automatically choose. And when it comes to the brightness, there's a peak brightness of 2000 nits. So while it isn't the brightest display around, it's still comfortable to use indoors and out. And speaking of indoors use, being a POLED display, it gets nice and dim as well, so won't be too bright and uncomfortable when using it at night. Out of the box, this phone's HDR compliant with Amazon Prime Video, YouTube, etc. But I will say I was surprised there's no always on display on here, at least not one I could find. Don't get me wrong, there's a display, a Moto display, where if you tap the screen, it kind of shines with what's on the lock screen. So you can still see your phone even if you don't unlock it and see your notifications, but that requires a tap remove. I'm a fan of always on displays, and if you are too, it's just a point to note. Now onto the cameras, and this is probably one of the best and simultaneously worst things about this phone. The Edge 50 Pro has a triple camera setup around the back, 3 OmniVision cameras. You've got a wide, ultra wide and telephoto. The primary camera is a 1/1.55 inch sensor, nice wide f1.4 aperture. It's got OIS as well, 50 megapixel resolution as well. It's going to capture a lot of detail, so that's promising. Not the biggest sensor at the price, but still respectable. As for the secondary cameras, they are much lower resolution. A 10 megapixel telephoto camera with a 3x zoom. Now this is low resolution, but with 1 micron pixels, they're relatively big, so it's not too much of an issue, hopefully. And then there's the ultra wide camera with a 13mm 120 degree field of view. That again, 13 megapixel isn't super high resolution, but you've still got relatively large pixels here. And what's even better, that ultra wide has autofocus, so can double up as a macro camera. Motorola isn't playing around with the selfie camera either. There's a 50 megapixel sensor with an f1.9 aperture and a 21mm field of view, and the lens has autofocus as well. And as you'll see in the video that it captures, it can create a really nice background separation with that. Photo quality is better than I've seen from any Motorola device in the past, and this is especially true because highlights and shadows pack stacks of detail. Moto's HDR has really hit a kind of next level. It's also great that they've dialed back the saturation and contrast compared to past devices, and the over sharpening as well. So even if you pinch in, it isn't terrible, but when you pixel peep, you do still see some processing. And the photos do lean on the saturated side of good, but they still are good, and that is a huge step forward for Moto. It's the main camera that showcases Motorola's new photo processing off the best. Shadow detail is really abundant. Highlights also pull back quite a bit of detail too without looking too HDR-y, and you also have good clarity. The f1.4 lens means it's able to capture really soft backgrounds and nice crisp subjects when you're taking up shots of nearby subjects, and generally speaking, it's the camera you're going to want to lean on. Having a 50 megapixel resolution, pixel binning as well, noise is nicely controlled. As for the secondary cameras, naturally they struggle more in more challenging scenes, but the HDRing is still pretty strong. But when the lights go down, that's when the secondary cameras really fall behind, and in really dark situations, this isn't going to perform fantastically at flagship grade, even from that main camera, but for the price, it's still competitive. There are also a few modes in here that help things along. Moto's fun modes are always present, spot color, etc. And there's a dual view, so you can take a video or picture of what's in front of you and behind you at the same time. But the pro mode is really where photographers are going to want to live, because you can fire up raw shooting that dials back all of that sharpness and contrast, but you're able to create a look that suits you. Things you can control, obviously not aperture, but shutter speed, ISO, white balance, etc. Before moving on to video, the reason the camera is also one of the worst parts of the Motorola Edge 50 Pro is because it is so slow to process your photo. If you're taking a picture of a moving subject, if you have kids, for example, this thing is going to be a royal pain in the butt. You will take a picture and then you'll tap it to look at what you've taken a shot of. You'll see a picture in front of you and you'll be like, yes, I captured the shot I was going for. And then after the processing finishes, which can take a few seconds, really slow, your shot's completely different. You've lost your moment and that's it. And so the Motorola Edge 50 Pro's photo quality at the heart is good, but the photo experience isn't always great. If you're someone who likes to take a photo, then pocket your phone, not tap it straight away, and also don't take photos of moving subjects too often, don't have kids, don't have pets, you may really enjoy the Motorola Edge 50 Pro. Like I said, core photo quality is pretty excellent, but that is one major caveat that might hold it back for many. Moving on to video, and while Motorola has definitely improved photo quality, unfortunately video quality is disappointing. The footage you capture up to 30 frames per second at 4K resolution looks muddy and overly contrasted, kind of like what I'd expect from a phone in 2015. So it's very disappointing at the price. And even worse, 4K footage is choppy. I thought it was just in the preview I was seeing as I was recording, but actually the end footage looked choppy too. And it's also a bit disappointing that you can't capture up to 60 frames per second at 4K, caps out at 30. What's really confusing is I found it was processed better when shooting with the front camera, which can also shoot 4K, and stabilization was also better from the front camera. So I'm not sure what's going on here, but for some reason selfie footage looks relatively good, not class leading, but not bad, but footage from the rear camera isn't great. So if you are one for video, then you may want to give the Edge 50 Pro a miss. If you're wondering how audio sounds from the Moto Edge 50 Pro when you record video, this is a good example of how selfie audio stacks up. I'm by a window, there's a bit of background noise, but not very much at all, so you should hear me clearly. The two side-mounted microphones are going to pick up selfie video well, but if you're shooting a subject that's behind the camera, then it's going to struggle a bit more the further they get. This is no different to any other phone, but while others like the Pixel 8 Nothing Phone 2 have rear microphones, so they're able to get more clarity from that rear audio when you're shooting subjects that are in front of you, the Motorola Edge 50 Pro is really going to struggle. As you can see in this clip shot across the OnePlus 12R, which actually did surprisingly well, the Pixel 8 and the Nothing Phone 2. Being recorded on the Motorola Edge 50 Pro. 4K 30 frames per second. Now this phone can't do 60 frames per second in 4K, you'd have to switch to Full HD, which is a bit of a bummer at the phone's price. And this is being recorded on the Pixel 8. It's a little bit windy, I'm outdoors, but this should give you an idea as to how the handheld footage compares between the Edge 50 Pro and the Pixel 8. Now I'm going to jump onto the OnePlus 12R. So this is the OnePlus 12R. Again, it's a really comparably priced phone here in the UK. What the 12R has is a larger battery capacity. It's 1000 milliamps bigger. And with all that talking, hopefully you now also know how the microphone fares. And finally, the Nothing Phone 2, another similarly priced phone that's much more powerful and can capture that 4K at 60 frames per second. However, to keep things fair across all of these phones, I've locked the 4K recording to 30 frames per second. And so all in all, the Edge 50 Pro selfie camera is absolutely fine, but the rear camera for video is a bit of a letdown, and that extends to audio as well. Motorola has long been an advocate of clean, stock-looking interfaces for their Android phones, and the Edge 50 Pro is no exception. Runs Android 14, but Moto does lay a little bit more on here than I've seen in the past. Starting with the things that we have seen, you've got that wrist flick in order to activate the torch. You can twist your wrist to fire up the camera. Double tap the back of the phone to activate a pre-programmed app or a shortcut, and there's a smart sidebar, loads of Moto options. There's a Moto folder on the home screen when you start it up, and you've also got options to dial things back, so it's called Moto Unplugged for some quiet time, and Ready For. Now if you haven't used Ready For before, but you have used Samsung DeX, it's a similar kind of thing, projecting what is on your phone to a big screen. There are a few reasons I prefer Moto's Ready For to DeX. For starters, you can project at high resolution, perfect if you've got a 2K or 4K TV or monitor. You also have some options when you initiate that projection. You can either open up a DeX mode that's like Windows style, just like with DeX, or you can jump straight into video calling, video viewing, so it shortcuts to your streaming applications. That works with Disney Plus, Netflix, etc. And you can also open up your games, hook up a joypad, and you can travel without any kind of laptop or anything, but if your destination has a TV and you've also got a keyboard and mouse, you can have almost a laptop or computer-like experience. So loads of value adds in here, but I will say, and as I'll come on to later, performance in Ready For is hampered by the speed of the processor, which is unfortunate. So I know I said Motorola typically has a super clean interface, but there are a few exceptions with the Edge 50 Pro. For example, quite a few Motorola notifications, not least of all the breaking news. It feeds the breaking news story into your notifications tray, and that happens automatically. It's opt out, not opt in. And when you pair that with any of your own news services and the Google feed to the left of your home screen, it can all feel like overload. So I really hope for the next iteration of Moto's UI, they pare things back. If you've noticed a theme throughout this review that power is one of the key things lacking in this phone, you would be correct. Like I said, video judders, photo processing takes ages, and when you're projecting from this to a big screen, loads of multitasked apps, especially when video is playing back, can create stutters even with a wired projection, which normally would be super smooth. When you're swiping through the UI and you have a lot of things going on as well, you're expecting 144 Hz refresh rate all the time, but occasionally that can drop right down, very occasionally, but it just pulls you out of the illusion that the Edge 50 Pro is a flagship. And a lot of phones at the price keep you in that illusion when it comes to smoothness. So the Snapdragon 7 Gen 3 seems to fall behind there, and that may have something to do with the storage read-write speed. 512 gigabytes of storage, but it's UFS 2.2 storage. When you look at the OnePlus 12R, for example, or the Nothing Phone 2, you get UFS 3.1 storage. And while there's 16 gigabytes of RAM in here, which is plenty, it's LPDDR4X RAM, which is nice and fast, but not quite as fast as, for example, the Red Magic 9 Pro, a similarly priced, in fact, cheaper phone, which has LPDDR5X RAM. So performance, generally speaking, is just too underwhelming for a phone of this price in the UK or Europe. But as I've said many times in this review, if you're in India, it is a really good deal. Casual gamers will be absolutely fine with the Edge 50 Pro, whether it's a 2D game or a basic 3D game, but with more advanced 3D games like Genshin Impact, that's where this thing is going to start to struggle. Medium graphic settings, I was able to comfortably play at around 45 frames per second, and it's a real shame considering this is a 144 Hz screen phone, so you kind of think it should be able to handle some kind of intense gameplay as well beyond 45 frames per second, but unfortunately it can't. Rounding off with a real high point of the Edge 50 Pro, and that's battery life. While the 4500 milliamp battery may look small, the limited power in here and limited power demands mean there's less power consumption, and I was easily able to get a day, more than a day, on a single charge. Also, fast charging, 125 watts, and you get a power brick in the box. It charges in less than 20 minutes from 0 to 100, which is awesome, and 50 watt wireless charging and 10 watt reverse wireless charging as well. That is where this phone starts to edge ahead of phones like the OnePlus 12R. And so after all that, you hopefully have a better understanding of how the Motorola Edge 50 Pro fares where you are. If in the UK or Europe, this phone's a little bit overpriced at its RRP. If you're in India, then it's actually underpriced and a fantastic deal. When it goes down to around £450 or thereabouts, it's going to be a much more attractive proposition here in the UK. People who are going to want really great comprehensive features across wireless charging, wired charging, good design, curved screen that looks fantastic. That Pantone color validated natural profile really did it for me. However, if you do want power, gaming power, and camera performance that isn't just good pictures, but a reliable shooting experience that's nice, nippy, and can keep up with you, then you may want to look to something like the OnePlus 12R or even the Nothing Phone 2. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. If you did, thumbs up button, comment below. What do you think of the Edge 50 Pro? How much does it cost where you live? And would you say it was a good deal? Let me know also if you want me to do more Motorola reviews, because this is the first one I've done in a long time. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day.